Hello, everybody. Welcome to Proc-N-Roll, your guide to practical procurement. This is episode 1. We come to you live with Natasha, the pro CPO from IBM, McKesson, Salesforce, and most recently, Nike. Zach, he's the go-to expert for all things procurement. Mr. KPMG lives in London. As you can see, Natasha's in the Bay Area, and I'm Conrad, self-proclaimed innovator. I started with paper PRs at Intel, transformational CPO at Adobe, and now founder and CEO of Graphite. We join you with almost 70 years of practical procurement experience, so you should find that helpful. Here at Proc-N-Roll, we'll discuss the latest and greatest trends and topics in procurement. At the same time, we'll talk and walk through the cornerstones and key building blocks of procurement. Whether you're new to procurement or a seasoned veteran, we'll have the discussions that will elevate your thinking and keep you grounded in practical procurement and value. Ultimately, your jobs, our jobs, and procurement really only exist for one purpose, and that is to enable business success of your organization. So let's jump in and get going. So for today, the podcast, what we want to do is get to know everybody. This is our first kickoff. This is super awesome. We've been planning this now for a couple of months. I've known Zach and Natasha for quite a while, but I'm excited for all of you to have the opportunity to get to know them as well. Natasha, why don't you take a minute and tell us what that means? CPO at multiple organizations, different industries, all over the place. Let's even start more basic. How in the world did you find your way into procurement? I have this theory, nobody was born thinking, hey, I'm going to be a procurement pro.
I didn't even find the way to procurement. Procurement found me. I'll actually ask. I'll start with your second question. Like, how is it being in procurement for 25 years? Like one day you wake up and you realize that you have no other place to go. Yes, maybe like when I was 10 years in, I was still trying to. I'm like, I like M&A. I like strategy. I'm going to deviate, I'm going to cheat on procurement, and I'm going to devote myself to another field. But you're brought back, and then one day you wake up and you're like, I've been in this field for 25 years. I am a procurement nerd. I'm a procurement fan. I'm procurement evangelist. I'm procurement geek, whatever you call it. It's your field. You're committed to it. You love it. You know it. It knows you. And it kind of like, you finally embrace your fate. But I moved to this.
Nerds unite, right? Once you get there, you know you're home.
Exactly. I moved to the States 28 years ago, took a year of English as a second language, kind of like needed to learn at least an alphabet to get to the workplace, and just started looking around. And that was a position of a temp at a Gap, just covering for a buyer who was moving on to another role. And my first job was I was checking the accuracy of the business cards. And as you know, people are very passionate about their business cards. God forbid there is an extra space between the letters, right? So that was my first job, and that was 26 years ago. So the rest is the history. It's my field. I love it, and I stick by it.
Yeah.
You've done amazingly though, Natasha, right? Because you've been CPO at so many different companies by now. Maybe you want to tell people a little bit about some of the different organizations you worked for?
I actually have been like a formal CPO just once at Nike. Before that, I was vice president of a services sourcing organization and category management at Salesforce. I was running strategic sourcing group at McKesson before that, so very different industries.
Incredible.
And before that, I was in consulting gig with IBM and with Proc-N-Roll, which is now Accenture, building procurement solutions to various clients. And the very cool job was when eBay acquired PayPal. They brought me in to build procurement organization for PayPal from scratch. So that was cool. And the first job at the Gap, that was my longest one, kind of like 6.5 years, because if you look at my CV, you would think that I don't know how to hold a job. But in reality, when you are in procurement and your role is in transformation, you normally 3-4 years. That's kind of like your rotation cycle.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you know what? I failed to add to this because it is the Proc-N-Roll podcast. Tell us a little bit about your favorite music. What's on your playlist? What's on your playlist right now? What's your go-to?
Well, it depends what I do, right? So, if I am running, then it's a lot of rock and roll, it's a lot of Latino music, it's a lot of something that like helps me to push through. If I am trying to sleep on a plane, that it's something more of a meditative nature, and if it's Friday, then it's something more like Shabbat type music.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Well, that is a lot of experience at a lot of different companies, a lot of different industries. So it should come as
Thank you.
no surprise to anybody why it was such a great idea to partner up with Natasha here to be practical from a procurement perspective. So Zach, and by the way, Natasha, you said you came to the U.S. From Russia, right? So
Yep.
and you're living in San Francisco. Zach's in London. Zach, tell us about your journey into procurement.
Sure, I can tell you all about it. I mean, I'd just preface by saying I won't put myself in the same league as yourself and Natasha. Right? You're both CPO.
Come
You make up
on.
most of those. You make most of those 70 years of experience. I think, like Conrad mentioned, I've got about 10. Right, all of it.
Give yourself some time and it'll shine, you get some shiny silver on the edges. It doesn't take
Come
long.
on, don't age me.
Coming along. It's coming along. I can see those white hairs coming. Yeah. So I joined procurement. I actually want to join consulting, right? And one of the consulting companies I applied for is 4C Associates, which is a small boutique in the UK. And they just specialize in procurement. So that's how I fell into procurement. My first internship was with them. And I thought I was doing consulting. I didn't really have a clue what procurement was about. But I really, really enjoyed what I was doing. I think I realized procurement had different elements to it. The analytics, you got negotiations, it's a bit of relationship management, dealing with a lot of hard numbers and driving like real value. And that's what I really love to do, right? I really love to quantify value, have an impact on the financial statements, etc. So I thought that was super cool. And at the boutique, I worked a lot for kind of smaller, mid-sized organizations, mid-tier organizations. So very often we were building procurement capability from scratch. But over time, I realized I also want to see kind of the bigger corporate view. And that's when I joined KPMG, Big Four, to get that kind of a lateral lens. Yeah, and that's a bit about how I
Well,
fell into
you might not have led these, procurement in these large organizations like I have in Natasha, but you've seen procurement at volume, I think, like because you're working with how many companies do you think you sort of had visibility to the procurement process?
Yeah,
Like more than 5, right? We're talking a lot more than 5.
Yeah, you're talking probably dozens, I'd say. And
Yeah.
it depends, because it depends. Some of them depends on some of them. We have like full-on engagements which might last for like a year, and you're implementing like very big transformation. So it is all practical, right? You're dealing with real people, real processes, trying to change things. But oftentimes, you just get on a call with a potential organization. They have a few questions, and you learn a little bit about their process. You don't spend tons of time, but you do pick up what they're doing, and you can learn a few things there as well. So yeah, I think consulting definitely gives you a great insight, right? You're able to sort of share that insight with across all the different clients that you get, and you're able to see sort of where procurement is, broadly across different businesses. I should probably mention industry I focused on most recently at KPMG is financial services. So I got a very good view there, or procurement within banking, within asset management, within private equity, etc. So yeah, but that's where I come in. Yeah.
So I'm curious. Well, we'll get into like things that you've seen across the organizations. This is just really cracking the window open to all the cool things we can talk about. That's super cool. I like,
Conrad, what's procurement for you?
what's procurement for me? Yeah. Well, I'll tell you how I got into procurement. I have a degree in biochemistry and a business degree, which I thought and I had no idea what procurement was. I feel a little bit probably like both of your stories where it just kind of happened to me. I did an internship in my MBA school. Normally you kind of follow into your internship. My internship was with Smucker's, the strawberry jam company, down in Southern California. So it was more of me practicing my Spanish and imagine an internship where you go in, it was night shift. You go in every day and your job is to pull strawberries off the conveyor belt, take them back into a room and, do the typical like microscope tests and things like that. But I got to eat the best looking strawberries all night long. Like it was amazing.
Sounds like a dream job.
Yeah. But and I got really good at looking at strawberry and saying that one is going to be very sweet. But there's all sorts of creepy crawlers in there too that we won't talk about. So anyway, after that internship,
Sorry to interrupt. You started
Sure.
with theme. Zach, what's your undergrad?
My undergrad was economics and finance. Yeah.
Okay, you're
Yeah.
closer. Mine is physical education and sport. I'm a PE teacher and gymnastics coach by training.
what a hodgepodge we are.
Exactly. But which is the most typical thing in procurement because like I didn't even know what procurement as a field is. Like I've been doing it for almost 26 years. If I still cannot explain my mom what I do.
Yeah, well, thank goodness for COVID because now everybody knows what supply chain is at least, right? So,
Yep.
um,
Okay, back to you after strawberry time.
well, after strawberries, I went back and someone was like in my MBA program. That weirdly, it was my wife's ex-boyfriend. He's like, "You would fit in really good at Intel. I did an internship there, and your personality fits." Which I didn't really understand until I started there and realized they have this constructive confrontation value, which I guess means I'm a little more direct than other people in my program. And I was like, okay, if I fit there, I want to work there. I applied for a job and it was, another day, another story, but they dropped me in procurement. I had zero idea what it was, just like you guys. But I found broken's not fair. Intel is incredibly high quality process oriented. But even in my little strawberry job, I was trying to bring computer technology to the job. Anyway, I got to Intel and we were doing purchase requisitions with paper, pink, white, yellow, that kind of thing that you'd find in some old mom and pop shop. That's how we were doing purchase requisitions back in the mid 90s. And I just felt like my passion has always been just make stuff work better at home, at work, wherever. And I just sunk my teeth into the fact that procurement wasn't working very well. There wasn't access to data. There wasn't tools. So that's now 30 years ago. And I've spent just about every day, every week, every year, just trying to figure out how to make purchasing work better in whatever bubble I was working in. So
Now you're
you mentioned a transformation, Natasha. That's what I love. Like as soon as the job starts getting into turn the crank and you're just showing up at work and doing what you did yesterday, yeah, that's a bit of a snoozer. I don't like that part.
But I think also what's sad and exciting at the same time is that the problems you were facing 30 years ago, a lot of our colleagues are facing them today. So somehow even though our field is populated by people that are very passionate about making it better, the qualitative difference is not happening as quickly as we had hoped. And maybe that's one of the reasons why many of us who've been in a corporate for quite some time, leaving corporate and trying to find solutions that can serve not just one company, but can be replicated and bring benefits to more than one company at once.
It's a little shocking when that realization that you just described hits you because you work so hard to make things better. And you go out one door and into another and you just find that like sometimes even the organization that you think you transformed kind of slips back because you're kind of holding this rock up on the hill and it just rolls back to where it was. But more often than not, you've made some lasting change and you turn into another organization and they're kind of right back where you started before. I think it's like my translation of all of that, Natasha, is that it's kind of, I don't know, Zach, I don't know if you have kids. I can't remember from our conversation, but it's a little bit like raising kids or kids in the world. Like children are always being born and they're immature. They grow up, they become teenagers, they rebel against their parents. They eventually go to college and find someone they love or whatever happens in their life and they get a job, right? Like Organizations do that with procurement. Like and it kind of parallels with what they're doing as a business. They start up, they might be on track to like implement procurement within a few years of starting up. Maybe it's 5 or 10 years down the road, and then they're super immature. They don't have tools. They don't have talent. They don't have processes. Somebody's got to come in like you, Natasha, and go, hey guys, like you're leaving millions of dollars on the table here. And then the process begins, right? Oh yeah, you're right. Let's do something. And then, but there's million other opportunities just across the street from organizations that are just trailing behind that. Yeah, I mean, there is no shortage of opportunities to make procurement work better. And I wish I could say that there's a magic button that lifts everybody at the same time to, mature procurement. You would think that all of the P2P technologies and all the CLM technologies and everything else would kind of do that, but I don't know. A lot of that seems like it's been empty promises. But my favorite music, almost always classic rock and roll. But Natasha, I'm like you when I'm trying to take a snooze. The Moonlight Sonata is my favorite go-to. Alexa, play Moonlight Sonata, and don't do it right now. She just might listen to me. She's in here. Alexa, stop. There we go. We're gonna get music policed here because she's gonna start playing music. But going to sleep to Moonlight Sonata is like the thing for me. So yeah, different times, different moods, different tunes. How about you, Zach? What's your go-to music?
Yeah, similar. I mean, I grew up in the 90s, right? So I got into kind of 90s style hip hop music. But I listen to literally everything. And similar to Natasha, very often if I'm on my way to work, I'm at the gym, listening to something that sort of pumps you up a little bit, something a little bit that's aggressive, punchy kind of thing. And then, yeah, it really depends on the time of day. And I'm always on the lookout, I think, for like new artists and new music. I got to say, as I get older, it becomes harder and harder and harder. I'm lucky enough to have 2 younger brothers, right, who I do kind of, try and prod some musical ideas from and stuff. But yeah, there's constantly new stuff. One thing that's actually surprised me about music, just as a side note, is the whole trend with buying out catalogs, entire catalogs from artists for something like 100 million. I think there's a couple of things, a hedge fund that's been doing this, been buying these catalogs for all these artists, and it just shows you that music is timeless, right? Because a lot of these catalogs go back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, and these catalogs are being bought with the assumption that there's going to keep being played and played for decades more. So I think music is great, and that you really go across the whole spectrum. And these days it's been easier than ever to create music, and you find new artists all the time on YouTube and different places. So I don't even know where it's going, Conrad. It feels like there's just music everywhere now.
Yeah. Sorry, Alexa, stop. She just keeps going.
It's interesting because we cannot hear.
Yeah.
Well,
We cannot hear that something is playing in the background.
Well, Zoom is so good at just getting rid of the background noise. It's amazing how the technology is growing. For all of you listening, this is not a podcast about music. This is just getting to know us today. But we will talk about practical procurement tips. My first recollection of music, we were living in the Middle East with my family, and they were playing Kansas, they were playing Bread. This is like in the late 70s. And so I got this imprinted into my those older genre music. I mean, we'd sit in the car with this cassette. It was back in the plastic cassette tapes after the, I guess, 8 tracks were in tandem with them. And yeah, and you would just put it in a cassette and you would listen to the same cassette for hours, right? Because you just had nothing else to do. We were driving across the desert in the Middle East, and on and on and on.
It's dust in the wind.
Yes.
All we are is dust in the wind.
Absolutely. So, but
it's ageless, baby.
Yeah. So, even now, so I got into all of that old music, and the other day now I'm in the car with my son, and he grabs my phone and pulls up some music so we can listen together. And what does he pull up? He pulls up those old classics like Hotel California, just some and it is timeless. It's amazing how it really connects the generations and the cultures, and music is really incredible. So I'm going to ask each of you what your first album was, but as I'm doing that, I'm going to share, just so everyone can see what we've done here, the Proc-N-Roll playlist now on Spotify. So we started to assemble some of our favorite music here into the Proc-N-Roll podcast. We'll put a link to this playlist. You can find it, search for it, find it, and enjoy it. But we love music, and we're having a lot of fun with this Proc-N-Roll, Proc-N-Roll name of the podcast. We'll keep talking about our latest songs of the day, and would love to hear from all of you what you think we're missing in our playlist. What's your favorite? But Natasha, first album. What's the first album that you owned?
So the word album is a big word because when I was growing up, I didn't have TV. I didn't have a cassette recorder. I had the radio, but that doesn't count. But I can tell you that when I was growing up in Soviet Union, American music was prohibited. I don't think, I think I've heard about Beatles first time when I was maybe 10, but somehow Soviet government had very tight relationships with Italians and French. So everything, there was a San Remo festival every year. So everything related to Italian music, you ask any Russian kid of my age, and I'll be 55 next month, and we can all sing Italian songs. We have no idea what the words mean, but we can, like, everything, Toto Cutugno, Adriano Celentano, we know it like a Russian lyrics, right?
Hey, you got to add some of those to the playlist, Natasha. So
I will. Yeah, no, those are very, very cool. So this is like 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
And so that's one, in French. So I had a French boyfriend, and the first time when we kind of like listened to my music, he's like, "Oh my God, you have more French music on your phone than I do," right? So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's a weird thing, but a lot of Russian kids of my age, they grew up on French and Italian music. So I'll add some best pieces to the.
Not just kind of imprints, right? The early music. That's really cool. Okay, Zach, first album.
oh man, I'm embarrassed. I think my first cassette that I owned, which probably the only cassette I ever owned, was a Britney Spears album. I don't even remember what it was called, right? I just remember
You are
showing.
even more deprived than I am.
Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, but that was the cassette. And I remember I was going to a new school. This was in Beirut, actually, when I was a kid. It was a new school I joined, and they had the bus come and pick you up. And I remember giving the whoever's riding shotgun, I'm like, here's a cassette. Like, do you want to play some of these songs? And he pops in, everyone groans, and I'm like, okay, I missed the mark on this. Well, nobody likes Britney Spears. But I think first proper album I owned would probably be like Eminem, something like that. I don't know which one because I had a bunch, and I just listened to them over and over and over. I had one of these CD players. If you remember those? Yeah. So that was my first album.
Wow. Well, I mentioned playing these cassettes. Like, all the music in my life was kind of my older siblings. I'm 4 of 8 kids. But when we came home from the Middle East, I don't know, within the first 6 or 12 months, I bought this Queen album, Another One Bites the Dust. I don't know the name of the album, but that was on there, and it would just do, Another One Bites the Dust. Yeah, that was like, but I would just play that over and over again, and yeah, like on this terrible sounding little turntable. And the kids now, like my kids now, they're buying turntables and they're buying vinyl again. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's the whole
My
thing.
daughter has it.
Yeah, it's again timeless, right? It's amazing how it rolls. But anyway, so that's Procurement Proc-N-Roll, the practical podcast. Before we wrap up our first intro episode here, I actually want to ask a couple of questions about procurement. So, coming in today, I was thinking, is procurement more or less relevant now, today, than it was, 10 or 20 or 30 years ago? Is it becoming more? And I mean, honest opinion, like Natasha, you're kind of saying it, like Some places it seems like nothing's changed in terms of everyone's having the same problems. But is it more or less relevant to the business? I know we all think we're relevant, right? Because we're like procurement is the center of our universe, but more or less relevant. What do you think?
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
I think it's more relevant, but I don't think it's consistent. And not just consistent across different industries or across different companies, it's even inconsistent within the same business entity. Depending when the business is in its cycle of financial performance, of maturity, of expanding its geographic presence or service offering, product offering, the companies at some point realize that they've been predominantly focusing on the top line, all right? And yes, they need to have a process how to pay the invoices to the suppliers and how to issue contracts, but it has nothing to do with procurement per se, right? It's a small fraction of. This is kind of like it's a purchasing function of procurement, which is more of a procedural than really creating a holistic, solid solution how the companies enable the company to produce the stuff that eventually goes to consumers, right? So, and when the companies realized that the focus predominantly for a long time had been on the top line and not on the bottom line, and there's a lot of inefficiency and effectiveness, that there's lack of compliance, there is kind of like broken policies, but most importantly, unfriendly processes, and that stakeholders spend more energy on trying to figure out how to bypass the process than following the process. And then they realize that procurement had been neglected, and procurement is not just the spend, which often is a lot of money, but it also is the experience that the employees within the company have when they just do their everyday job. And the companies realize that this should be in focus, this should be transformative, and this should actually, if we pay some attention to it, then we can actually make a great progress, not just from financial performance perspective, but also from the employee experience and from the ultimate consumer experience. Because the better procurement works, the better the product looks and packaged, then it's more sustainable and it gets to the hands of the consumers faster, right? So there are a lot of benefits of having well-established procurement processes and that are delivered by procurement organizations. So even when the companies make that realization, as always in business, how committed you are, right? Like, are you participating or are you committed, right? Like just as that joke about the chicken and the pig, right? Like who's participated and then who's committed. Yeah, who's committed and who's participating. So
Zach, you've heard this before, right? The chicken and the pig? Oh, you're on mute there, Zach.
no, he had.
I haven't heard it. No.
Okay, you got to go deeper than the introduction there.
Okay, Conrad, I'll leave it for you. So you'll pick it from me in exactly on that point, because I'm about to wrap up. My point is that if you're participating, then rest assured, you will not finish the job. You'll stop at 75%, because your priorities will change. There will be another shining object, because the fatigue will settle in, because you're not committed, because it's the right thing to do, but they will start competing at some point with gazillion of other right things to do for the company. And as many of us observed across many companies, is that people always want to do the right thing. The only question is that, are they committed enough? Do they have enough patience to stay through the course and really reap the benefits that if you would do the entire 100%, you would actually change your environment for good, for a very effective and efficient solution for many years to come. But when you're just flirting with the idea for a couple of years, then you're not really progressing forward. So answering your question, yes, we are becoming more relevant. Yes, there are a lot of senior leaders who see the benefit of running effective and efficient procurement organizations. Yes, there's understanding how it impacts consumers. I do not see consistent commitment across not just the companies where I worked. I stay closely connected with a lot of my peers. And because of the competing priorities and how focus shifts.
How do you achieve that consistent commitment then, Natasha, do you think? Like, does it come down to whoever heads up the function, that it's ultimately, they're the stewards, right? So it's on them to sort of maintain that, or is there something that you can sort of, almost embed procurement's roots in the business for the long run, right? No matter who's at the helm kind of thing.
I think it's a brilliant question, but may I suggest that we take it as a theme for our next talk? Because if we start peeling this onion, it's a great conversation to have, but there are a lot of details that we'll have to uncover.
Yeah,
but
that is an awesome topic for one of our upcoming podcasts. Natasha, I was thinking about a friend that worked with me in procurement at Adobe. And she was kind of bemoaning, I won't say her name here, but she was kind of bemoaning that the executive team didn't really care what we were doing in purchasing. And I always kind of felt like, well, I don't really want them to care what we're doing because if they care what we're doing, either we're doing a bad job or the company's in a dire straits and they're knocking on our door every 5 minutes to go negotiate the contracts. But it definitely, I'm not judging that comment one way or another. I think she's right. Yeah. And as leaders, we want and need more visibility and more participation upward in the organization. But it strikes me that without diving deep into what you're saying, that it takes real leadership to be committed over time, because the cycles of the business and everything that happens are generally, maybe Black Lives Matter, for example, and all the things that happened a few years ago with supplier diversity. The things roll in and everyone's talking about it, and then it's the last thing that anybody in leadership's talking about anymore. And if you want to do supplier diversity or any of these things, like, you have to live through these moments of high intensity and focus and, carry forward. So I do think, one of the things I really want to focus on in this podcast is leadership. Like, how do you show up, and how do you, what you're saying, how do you lead real, lasting, valuable change and valuable contribution to the organization? I think it's really fantastic.
I'll just say one thing to your colleague remark. People don't care if they don't understand. Right? And I think that, like, the good 70% of the CPO role is to be in the department of internal sales. And it's not really sales. It's educating people. And it doesn't come down to the 3 people at the top. It comes down to working with all the stakeholders and all the peers across the environment, in educating and really sharing how procurement can make their life easier and better, and what needs to happen for that. All right. Like, you can't achieve progress if you just go to the top and deliver a message, because even if your wish list gets fulfilled and you get like a green light to drive the changes you want, you need to have your surrounding environment to actually embrace the changes and be part of them, and not just being on the receiving side, but of the changed environment, but being participating, like active participant of what the change actually means, right? And it's a process, and I think that if we have serious conversation and uncover it step by step versus, because we spend a lot of time talking about music today, right? So I think it's a fascinating conversation to have, and I think we need to bring a couple of maybe peers of ours just to get their examples, because it's not about sharing the pain points. It's actually more about sharing what worked.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Zach, same question to you. I mean, it's hard to beat what Natasha just said because I think she just set the bar pretty high in terms of what we want to accomplish here in the podcast and as professionals. But still, what's your take here?
Yeah, I think Natasha covered it extremely well, especially that the last point Natasha brought. 70% of the CPO role, the head of role, is sort of it's internal sales, right? It's education. I think that's true. Typically, what I see is procurement, successful transformation is always driven off the back of some kind of driver, right? So there's a big cost challenge, for example, or there's an M&A that needs to happen, or a company wants to IPO, and so it needs to show that its costs are under control and it has mature process. Risk is another big driver. Actually, we see in financial services is now regulatory requirements around third-party risk management. So that drives a lot of investment in procurement. And believe it or not, another big driver is sort of too many complaints. So when there's too much noise, too much of a bad experience for internal customers, procurement gets escalated up to the board, and they realize they need to do something about it. So I think those are kind of the main triggers for procurement.
So there you have it. Procurement is relevant. We've been at it for together 70 years, but it still matters. I like to say that we've all talked about this. The whole point of procurement is to bring enable business success for the organization. If we can't do that, then actually we're not relevant. The team's not relevant. We have to do that, and if we can do that, we're forever relevant. I agree with that. Any wrap up thoughts from either one of you before we call it a end to the first episode of Proc-N-Roll?
I think just one thing I'd add is, and just building on what Natasha said, the importance of sort of understanding the business that you're in as the leader of your procurement department. And need to make sure that your team also are invested in understanding what the business's objectives are. What are the big initiatives that are going on? What are they trying to do? And it's the onus is on you as the procurement professional to go to the business, tell them, here's how I'm going to make your life easier, right? Here's how I'm going to drive much better value for you than what you've got currently. But to get there, I think something else that you and Natasha touched on, you need to get the basics right. You need to get that purchasing process sort of running seamlessly, right? Stop the noise, stop the complaints. People can get the goods and services that they want when they want them. At that point, it's a great opening for you to then go and build your relationships with those other parts of the business, right? And say, actually, we're a strategic procurement function. We're not just about purchasing, right? And then you're into a whole different world, Conrad, where it becomes about the category of what you're buying, and it's about your supply market knowledge, and it's about your expertise, and it's about your negotiation skills, et cetera, and always in indirect sort of categories. It's always more complicated, right? Than say your direct bread and butter procurement. So I just add that lens, I think, just to say that it's really important you build those relationships, but also get the basics right.
Yeah, I love it.
What Zach said triggered my thinking that how often do we train procurement people on understanding how company makes money, like where the revenue is coming from, right? Like join the company and say, hey, how do you make money? What do you mean? We sell software subscription for software, right? No, but how do we make money? Do we make it from the government that buys subscription? Do we get it from small businesses because they buy a lot of it? Do we get it from one big guy? Like, do we invest? Like, if procurement people will start understanding how companies make money, they can actually be very creative about their procurement solutions. Conrad, you need to stop us because we're just feeding off each other. Like keep triggering each other to continue.
I absolutely love it. There is thousands of hours of conversation that we can have in a really meaningful way together. I'm super excited about the three of us coming together. One of the things I love the very, very most is we're all so different in like 45 dimensions. We're all born in completely different parts of the world. Our family, our culture, our religions, just to go down our work experience, what we're doing today in our jobs. And it's procurement that brought us together, right? And we're all super passionate about that. I know that as we have these conversations and we build one topic on top of another, it'll be very interesting and rewarding. For me at least, I'm loving these. I'm loving our conversations already, and I'm hoping that the 2.5 people that listen to this podcast, hopefully there will be at least 3. Then it's a one.
At least we're helping Solo and Conrad, right?
Exactly. And so anyway, we're going to invite friends and colleagues and peers. We're going to talk about some amazing things over the next several years of building out this podcast. We hope it's going to be helpful. If you have topics that you want us to talk about, things that are bothering you, people you think we should talk to, don't hesitate to add comments. Send a note. We haven't built out a website and all that stuff yet, but it'll come. Next up is the Proc-N-Roll, the concert T-shirt. Who knows? We're gonna have a blast with this. We hope you enjoy it as well. No.
So I said, "Oh my God, I'm bracing myself to whatever else you can come up with."
Maybe the Proc-N-Roll concert.
Yeah, the big music. What do they call it?
I'm gonna be singing Felicita.
Oh, beautiful. Well, since we can't take the songs off of Spotify and play them for everybody on here, we just may have to do a little bit of lip sync or something. I don't know. Anyway, here we go. Episode number 1's a wrap. That's on the books. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you in another couple of weeks. See y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Oh my gosh, I forgot to
maybe
talk about the chicken and the pig. When you sit down for breakfast, the pig is fully committed and the chicken is only participating. You got it? Think about it.
When you sit down for breakfast, the pig is fully.
There's an egg on your plate from the chicken.
Yeah,
And
it's
there's
from
bacon
chicken.
on the bacon. The chicken just gave you the egg.
I understood. Yeah, I actually Googled it, but I didn't have time to read it. So.
That wasn't good one. I forgot to do it.